Joining me now is Frances Martel. She is one of my fellow writers at Breitbart News. Frances, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
So you had written a piece this week talking about the foreign connections to the riots and the protests that we're seeing take place across the country. You point to an FBI report that showed that there are Cuban and Venezuelan origins in some of the organization and funding. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So something that we've seen in Latin America throughout the past year is a significant increase in rioting, burning down businesses. Basically, everything we're seeing in the United States now happened in Chile, Ecuador, Colombia in the fall of 2019. And what we saw in Chile in particular is that the Chilean police started finding that among the alleged social justice protesters who were burning down key infrastructure like subways and churches, that there were Venezuelan nationals, Cuban secret police agents, people affiliated with Marxist groups in South America. So what we saw was a lot of people in Santiago, in the Chilean capital, saying, they burned down my church, they burned down my business, and I don't know who they are. And Santiago is a city of 8 million people, but it's pretty sprawled out. So it's not somewhere where, if an influx of people from outside just flooded a town, that the neighbors wouldn't notice. They did notice. And so I found that very informative in terms of what we're seeing now, where the locals in places like Minneapolis are saying, we don't know who these people burning our businesses down are, and we'd like it to stop.
So one of the things you pointed out was there are these revolutionary flags that are appearing not just in South Florida, but in Minneapolis and elsewhere across the country. Why is that significant?
Because the behavior is so similar in terms of the rioting that it's a little disarming to see these symbols. For example, there was an activist wearing a shirt with Hugo Chavez on it in DC, at a protest in DC. We saw a flag associated with Chilean indigenous groups in Minneapolis. We saw a woman who identified herself as a Chavista, as a supporter of the Venezuelan socialist regime in Florida. And we saw Sandinistas in Florida, which are the Nicaraguan terrorists that control that country now. And my question is, what does any of this have to do with George Floyd? As far as I know, George Floyd was not a Chavista. George Floyd did not support the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. So that raises a lot of questions as to what is the connection here.
Well, why don't you answer your own question?
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying that the Sandinistas killed hundreds of protesters in 2018 and 2019 who were anti-socialist protesters. So if you're talking about police brutality, if you want to end police brutality, why are you waving the flag of a government that killed hundreds of protesters? And the answer to that is simply, you're not fighting police brutality. You're fighting American exceptionalism. You're fighting the American Republican Federalist system to take it down because you don't inherently believe in the structure of America. This doesn't end with police simply ceasing to engage in brutality, which is a goal I think everyone in America agrees with. I haven't seen a single person say that George Floyd deserved to die or that the police officer who killed him was correct. No one is saying that. So that's not what the argument is. The argument is to stop that behavior. A lot of these leftists believe that we have to take down the entire structure of America. We have to do away with the Constitution, with the Founding Fathers, with capitalism, with business as we know it, with churches, with schools. So it's everything that makes us American that we need to destroy in order to stop this. I think that's what the message is here.
It's hard to comprehend that the solution, I mean, I don't think this is the solution, but from the leftist perspective, the solution to all of this is to burn America down, literally. What do you think needs to be done to really sort of educate people and get people to understand this is really the objective?
Well, I think one of the biggest failings of America's educational system on the primary and secondary levels up to high school is that we learn a lot about our own country in isolation. We don't learn about what it's like in a lot of other countries. So when I try to make the point to people that if you were watching Chile last year, you would understand that this has nothing to do with George Floyd, I mean, how many people even know the basics of Chilean politics in the United States?
Nobody.
If you're lucky.
They can't point to it on a map.
Yes, exactly. People fail to understand what's so great about America when they have nothing to compare it to. If all you've learned is the history of, and especially the bad stuff, which is important, obviously, slavery and the Trail of Tears and the Confederacy, we need to know that. But we also need to look at everything else and in the global context. And so I think the first and most important thing is for people to understand that for example, again, Chile experienced the same thing because there was a proposed subway fare hike. No one agreed with the subway fare hike. That has nothing to do with burning churches. And then you saw similar things in Europe over the past couple of years. You saw these Antifa groups that were trying to destroy property in order to take down capitalism. And you see that sort of thing all the time in Ecuador as well. And in Ecuador, it was the president sort of innocently suggested getting rid of a gasoline subsidy, and suddenly churches were burning. And so the fact that it's all the same reaction to very different things is illuminating. The other thing I think is very important here is the fact that that no one opposes the inherent goal here regarding George Floyd, and that the people running this aren't people from the communities who are upset. If you look at the videos of the destruction, it's white people, it's young white leftists who have gone to universities, who believe in Marxism, and you see so many videos of Black, Hispanic, underprivileged people saying, why did they burn my business? Why did they burn my home? They burned down an entire affordable housing complex in Minnesota, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And this was white people who did it. So that, I think, is very fundamental to this understanding, because guess what? The people flying the Chilean indigenous flag in Chile while they were burning churches, they were white, well-to-do leftists as well. It wasn't the Mapuches, the indigenous people, that were burning parts of Santiago. It was the upper class, the leftist upper class.
So what does the white upper class, as you say, what do they have to gain by burning places down? I mean, is that a political play, and so therefore they can, take some sort of political power, whether it's overthrowing the government or it's electing people or whatever it is? What is their objective behind that?
Well, I think part of it is that a lot of the younger, more violent people, they're veterans of Occupy Wall Street. They're people who simply do not believe in capitalism. I don't think it's pragmatic. And that's why you see them, for example, trying to destroy the CNN headquarters. CNN is the greatest propaganda tool that the left has in the United States. If you were trying to actually make a pragmatic political move, that's not what you attack. So I think this is coming from a generation, including my generation, millennials, who went to college and were, instead of having to read, the entire Federalist Papers, they had to read Foucault and Deleuze and Guattari and Marx and Engels, and they were brainwashed into that. So I don't even think, they're not even trying to run for office. They're just trying to break things for the sake of breaking it.
Well, when you see these videos, and you just have to imagine the acts that have been committed that were not caught on video. And you're right, it's a lot of white people, and that's a white person saying that. It's a lot of white people who are doing that, and you just think, where is your soul? Where's your brain? How can you treat human beings like this? And this is not about justice for George Floyd, as you said, because if you look at what's happening in Minneapolis, he's been arrested. He's in jail. He's being prosecuted. I think the same will probably, if you've got Keith Ellison running the show, which he now is, it's probably going to be a similar fate for the other police officers that were involved. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I'm just saying that's probably, what he is going to try and get. Justice, it seems to me, is taking its course. What we're seeing is going well beyond that. And when there was David Dorn, who was shot because he was protecting an appliance store, and he's black. When you have that sort of thing taking place, this is not about black and white. I think this is much deeper, and it gets to ideology.
This has nothing to do with defending Black lives, because then, like you said, Dorn's life was a Black life too. and it was taken. And to clarify, I don't think that this is only white upper class people, but I can't help but notice that the people organizing the riots, the people who allegedly are compiling bricks in a corner to give to people to destroy businesses, don't quite look like George Floyd.
Right.
And that's important. That's very important for this, because we're being told that if we disagree with burning down an affordable housing complex for underprivileged people, that we want George Floyd dead. And that's not what's going on here at all.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time. I would love to have you back because I think we could probably talk, endlessly about this. Frances Martel, Breitbart News, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, and I hope we can do it again.
Thanks for joining me on this week's episode of The Kyle Olson Show. We'll see you next week.